As I was just having a chat with Karen off camera. I said, well, how stocks? Karen just said, just don't look. In fact, there's a lovely email from... There's some very nice viewers out there. This is from Jerry, who's a viewer of ours. He said, yeah, totally agree with you, with your view about American exceptionalism. I was basically just saying, I think I wouldn't write off American companies just yet, despite everything that's being thrown. He says, though, my stock portfolio has been short-term painful, and he's got I think that's a smiley face emoji with a small tear.
How often do you think people are now checking their holdings? The buy and hold strategy, if it's in a portfolio.
Well, there's two ways of doing this, Karen.
Is it hourly?
Well,
is it minute by minute? Is it daily? Is it weekly? Is it quarterly?
You know the old adage, don't you, that every trader becomes an investor when it goes wrong.
Yes.
So a lot of people now are saying, I'm an investor. I'm an investor. I'm actually an investor, and I'm dollar cost averaging. Yeah. There's a lot of dollar cost averaging going on at the moment. Meanwhile, President Trump has clashed with the Fed Chair Jerome Powell, once again calling him, quote, a major loser, and urging him to cut rates immediately. In a Truth Social post, he accused Powell of refusing to act, even as inflation pressures ease. It comes after Mr. Trump wrote last week that Powell's termination could not come fast enough, whilst the White House is now apparently studying whether the Fed chair can legally be fired before his term ends in May next year. Cameron.
The Chicago Fed President Austin Goolsbee has told CNBC he's in favor of a wait-and-see approach from the Federal Reserve, especially with uncertainty around Trump's so-called reciprocal tariffs.
I think our uncertainties at this moment, and why, for me personally, when I hear Jeremy saying preemptive cuts, we're getting announced retaliation. We're talking about revisiting the tariffs in 90 days. And we don't know what the impact on the supply chain is going to be. So I think we want to be a little more the steady hand and trying to figure out the through line before we're jumping to action.
The latest CNBC All-America Economic Survey has found the majority of respondents view President Trump's sweeping tariff policies as damaging for the U.S. economy. It's a really interesting survey. Have a look at what Steve Leisman has to say.
A plurality of Americans think across-the-board tariffs are a bad idea, with most believing they'll hurt jobs and be worse for inflation. And the public is having a hard time believing there's a payoff at the end of the process. The CNBC All-America Economic Survey finds 49% of respondents say across-the-board tariffs are a bad idea, with 45% feeling strongly about it. 35% support them, and 15% are undecided. So there is some scope for the president to gain some support. Among those most negative on tariffs are Democrats, African Americans, 18 to 34-year-olds, and those Americans living in the urban environment. Most positive include Republicans, rural dwellers, those with income above $100,000, and men 50 and older. Majorities think tariffs hurt importers, the cost of everyday goods, the overall economy, and workers. But by 51 to 37%, Americans say they'll help companies producing in the U.S. Americans have also not embraced the president's concern about our allies representing an economic threat to the U.S. Mexico, Japan, Canada, the EU, and the U.K. are all overwhelmingly seen by the public as more of an economic opportunity than an economic threat. Only China is seen by Americans as more of a threat, but by a modest 44 to 35% margin. It remains to be seen whether it matters if President Trump is out of step with the broad public on tariffs and trade. The president's base backs him on tariffs, believing his policy will yield results over time. But their tariff support is 20 points below his overall support. Democrats overwhelmingly disapprove of tariffs, as do independents, by a 2-to-1 margin. Steve Leisman, CNBC Business News.
Right, the U.S. president met with CEOs of three of America's largest retailers, Walmart, Target, and Home Depot, to discuss the impact of tariffs on prices. Now, following the meetings, the three companies issued near identical statements saying they welcome the opportunity to share their insights and look forward to further dialogue. I mean, that's a cop-out, isn't it? Quite frankly, from the three companies. It's like, what can we say that's not going to upset anyone, that's not going to upset the president, that's not going to say anything? Well, we welcome the opportunity for further dialogue, and we welcome the opportunity to share with Mr. Trump our issue. I mean, it's a cop-out, isn't it?
Well, in some ways, have there been some early wins against the likes of competition from Temu and Shein versus some other losses, with tariffs obviously driving up the cost of some of those goods, and then the consumer who looks certainly less resilient now because they're concerned about the prospect of a recession.
So kept their jobs so far, though, Karen, by and large.
That's the big one, and economists always say that if you don't have a job, that's when it becomes very real around mortgages. But the fact is that we are seeing more uncertainty at a sector level and at a company level because of the tariffs. So there is an element there where it's hit different sides of the business. Good news some ways, bad news other ways. The question is whether international markets now open up for some of these retailers where they have not been as open in the past.
International markets?
India, we were talking about, for instance, if there happened to be a deal for the likes of Walmart and Amazon, would that get better for some of these companies?
Your model. Look at if you're talking about Walmart, look at Walmart's global expansion ideas and opportunities previously. You know, it didn't go that well with Asda in the UK, and that was one of their big marquee things. And very difficult to break into local markets with the international offering. Anyway, we will come back with plenty more on this. Plus, we'll digest the Tesla numbers, which are breaking later on this evening. That's it for Squawk. Up next, Street Science.